Immigration law expert Gary Eisenberg is back in our studio, this time to weigh in on immigration red tape following the UK's vote to leave the EU. Gary, good morning and welcome back to our studio.
Thank you.
Very surprising result last week, as we know. First of all, let's just start off with, the UK has about 2 years to sort of get their ducks in a row, and it's unlikely that sort of border controls are going to change much in that time. But thereafter, in your opinion, what is likely to happen to, say, highly skilled Europeans in the UK and vice versa?
Well, there could be two regimes. We're talking about Europeans, nationals of other EU countries who are already established in England. What do when all EU rights are revoked and Section 50 of the Rome Treaty is actually triggered and England is out? What do those European nationals do? What rights are accorded to them? Are they treated as Europeans within a new treaty environment? And it really depends on the type of treaty that's going to be negotiated. The jury's out on the nature of a treaty like that. It would have to be a treaty, an association treaty of some kind, enabling free movement of EU nationals. Will that only apply to EU nationals living in the UK? And will it also apply reciprocally to UK nationals living in other EU countries, and there are millions of them? So it depends on the type of treaty that eventually will be negotiated. It's a very complicated kind of treaty because rights only may be given to individuals who have been established for a certain amount of time in the UK and vice versa, UK nationals in the EU. Or it will be accorded to newcomers as well. That's the one regime. The other regime is without an association agreement with a free trade provision, a free movement of people provision, will be what type of immigration rules will apply to those people. Will it apply to EU nationals equally to as such rules would apply to Russian nationals living in the UK, for example? The jury's out.
Gary, what about foreign labourers in the UK? Would there be a different type of immigration policy, do you think, extended to them? I mean, as we know, a huge portion of them come from Eastern European countries, and would the UK be able to fill that void?
Exactly. For the growth of UK infrastructural projects, national GDP contribution, what did Polish nationals in their hundreds of thousands contribute? What did Hungarian nationals? Polish construction workers. What percentage of construction work was executed by Poles who were known to have to be expert in the trades? For example, what do those people do? Relatively unskilled, but remarkably important for the UK economy. The jury's out on that one too, because if it's going to be an agreement which will allow the freedom of movement of Europeans within the UK and vice versa, that won't constitute a problem. There probably wouldn't be any extra points for highly skilled Europeans in the UK. It would be simply an allowance for the freedom of movement of other other EU nationals within England. That's probably how it will be. However, anything can happen. You will have noticed now with the referendum result to leave the EU that there's a backlash, that prominent politicians in the rest of the EU are telling the UK to hurry it up. So will it be an easy freedom of movement treaty to negotiate? It would appear by the reactions of other EU politicians, no, anything but simple.
Gary, there's been, of course, a lot of sort of knee-jerk reactions and sort of promises to the people of England, Scotland, Wales, etc. in the wake of this. Scotland now talking about having a second referendum and potentially breaking away from the UK, which would then, put them back in ties with Europe. Is that going to be a good or bad thing for the UK?
It's going to be fascinating, not only to check what the result of the second Scottish referendum will be, but other European countries have threatened exactly the same thing. The question, I think, is misplaced. The question should be, will there be an EU left in 2 years' time? And that will determine how many countries will have a referendum, perhaps a second referendum, perhaps the first. But I think those results are going to be important. To answer your question about Scotland, Scotland has wanted, there's been a movement in Scotland, a very powerful movement, especially under Prime Minister Sturgeon, a nationalistic a movement in Scotland which is gaining more momentum, especially as a consequence of the Brexit result. And I have a feeling that Scotland will become independent. I think the Brexit result will feed nationalism in Scotland, because that, I think, is the natural backlash. And for those individuals with Scottish ancestry, good for them. They will still be able to live within the EU anyway, while that may be a limitation on British nationals. Quite an irony, in a sense. So we'll have to see. These are interesting times.